All right. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Build It Live's 2022 theater sessions. I have an amazing person with me here today, Ben Jakins, the Director of Cybersecurity from ThreatLocker. Ben, what's going on, my man?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Really glad to be here.
Hey, we're really excited. We got a great topic today. We're going to be talking a lot about ransomware, and really the big conversation is don't let your data be held hostage. But we also have some really special stuff that we're going to be doing today. There is going to be a special code to join us July 27th through 29th for today only. ThreatLocker's code for a $200 admission to the event for today only is going to be lock in at 200 for ThreatLocker. So thanks ThreatLocker for sponsoring that today and getting everybody into the event. One of the other cool things is we're going to be giving away a couple of free tickets to two lucky people today inside of the webinar. So we are going to talk a little bit about that. But one of the big things, I like to start off the show and having a conversation and having a little bit of fun. And Ben, I like to start off with a trivia question, man. And so
Okay.
why don't you give me a trivia question that you have that maybe the audience can pop in here and answer?
Okay. Pop quiz time, I guess. So I guess my question would be, what was the first documented version of ransomware that was released? What's the first kind of version of ransomware, the name of ransomware that we initially think of, or that we know of in the wild? And a bonus point if you can tell me the year. As well.
Nice.
That's a bonus point there.
For everybody that's watching, I love that trivia question. And we started doing this. It seems to be really a lot. People are starting to really like it. What was the name of the first documented ransomware? And to Ben's point, bonus points for the year. That's interesting. It hasn't been that long ago, right, Ben, that we, started seeing this and being in technology for quite some time now. I think we all recognize where the shift started, right? Right when the internet started getting speed is right where I think, a lot of things came into light. But, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts here. But before we get started, I think we have something that we need to address, and that's the important part of where we're at today, and that's the security temperature and the ecosystem. And starting off with, let's just get started and talk a little bit about ransomware. Like, what is that to you and Threat Locker?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, ransomware by definition is holding something to ransom, and the most common piece that we see is holding data to ransom. Now, that can come in a form of different ways, whether that be the usual way that most people are aware of, which is encrypting your data and then asking you to pay to be able to have your data back. But one of the most common things that we've seen quite recently, actually, is that about 77% of attacks that are happening in ransomware actually involve the threat now to leak exfiltrated data.
Wow.
So we're seeing this shift when it comes to ransomware away from just, hey, I'm going to encrypt your data and you need to go ahead and pay, to I'm encrypting your data, you need to pay, but I recognize you've probably got a backup tool or a disaster recovery solution, something along those lines, and I know that you'll probably get back up and running using those. So instead, what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is steal your data as well, and then we can leak that out to the dark web. We can leak it up to other threat actors. The worst of all, leak it to your competitors and to your customers.
Yeah.
Your internal documents and things. So we're seeing a huge shift with ransomware actually away from um, just infection to now infection and the threat of leaking data.
I mean, and for those that are following along in the news, we just saw a big one, right? Where they were holding all of this patient care data out and saying, "Hey, we're going to release it to the world if you don't pay up,"
Yeah.
right? And that's a huge infraction, a security infraction, right?
Yeah, I mean, we look at some of the huge attacks that have been going on over the last year. We had things like Colonial Pipeline was obviously hit. Now
Yeah.
that was 2021, I
Yep.
do believe, May 2021. But in the same month, you then had a company called Brenntag, who I believe are a pharmaceutical firm, something on those lines. They were hit. They had 150 gig of data that was actually threatened to be leaked, and they ended up paying 4.4 million US dollars. You had Acer. So Acer, the huge computer manufacturer, yeah, they were hit. Now, I don't know if they've paid, but they had the largest ransom value at over 50 million US dollars.
Wow.
We're just seeing these attacks are going on and on. JBS Foods, they paid out 11 million. You had AXA, an insurance company, they were hit. CD Projekt, for any of the gamers who are in this stream today, you'll recognize the name CD Projekt. They were the company behind what was supposed to be one of the best games released in the
Yeah.
last couple of years, called Cyberpunk. And
Yeah.
some would say there were too many promises that were made, and we could have a whole webinar
Whole
basically
nother webinar on that one for sure.
just based on that. But they were themselves as well while they were going through development, and
Yeah.
the threat actors threatened to leak source code. So
Yeah.
we're seeing these attacks that were just going on and going on and going on, and it's not slowing down. And while we always think about these large scale businesses are being hit, insurance companies, game developers, computer manufacturers, food distributors, supply chain, all that kind of thing, it's realistically it's not. Realistically, we're looking at small medium businesses being hit. There was a great study by a company called Coveware, who essentially, and I could be underselling them completely. So I'm sorry if anyone from Coveware is listening to this. I am sorry if I undersell you completely, but from what I've read, they will act as an intermediary. So if you get hit with ransomware, they negotiate on behalf of you, which is a very niche kind of product to offer,
Yeah.
but it's cool nonetheless.
Yeah.
And they can hopefully they have negotiation tactics, and they can try and get it so that you pay less money if you have to.
Right.
Now, they released a study that essentially showed that 70% of ransomware attacks occur on businesses that are under 1,000 employees. 33% of ransomware attacks are for businesses of under 100 employees. We're not
Right.
talking huge multi-level businesses that are being hit.
Yeah.
We are talking small, medium that is being hit day in, day out because they don't have the security solutions to protect themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think, one of the big things that, as we start to think about this, for a lot of people that are joining us today, they might be managed services providers. And that's our target market space, right? We hear the big guys, the enterprises, we're like, thank God I didn't have them as a customer, right? Because, my liability might have been a little high there. But for those ones that are a lot smaller, that's where there's a larger opportunity because of it, right? And I think there's a lot of other things, and additionally to ransomware, right? I mean, there's also malware, right, Ben?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, malware comes in a multitude of forms, whether it be stealing your data, encrypting your data, ransomware, whether it be even down the line of we're seeing a huge amount of attacks that are essentially setting up for future attacks.
Right.
So getting footholds into the system to be able to essentially then run whatever it is that they would like on the machine. Application vulnerabilities are something that are growing literally year on year on year. Web app vulnerabilities went up by about 20% last year, I believe.
That's
So
awesome.
we're seeing, it's great. Like, just wonderful. Thank you. Like,
Yeah.
we're seeing these vulnerabilities are getting higher and higher, and apps are becoming more vulnerable. The matter of fact is, we use software in our day-to-day lives in ways that we know. We are streaming, we are using streaming software. We open up our laptop and we're going and checking our emails. We're using Google Chrome or Brave browser or whatever it is that browser that you prefer to use. We use software in ways that we recognize, but we also use it in ways that we don't recognize. My favorite instance of this is ambulances. So when an ambulance gets to a stoplight, the stoplight will try to turn green as quickly as possible to get the ambulance to its destination as quickly as possible, so it can save lives. Now, that is software that we don't think about, but it impacts our day-to-day life. I bought a new car in February, and it has a feature where I can get the wing mirrors. Is that what do you call them, wing mirrors in the US?
Yeah, the mirrors. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, that's good. Sorry. I always have to try and think, am I saying like an English term or something, or am I saying a US term?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
My family love it because then I go back to the UK and they're like, Ben, you're just saying American terms over everything. So I get very confused. But so I have a feature where I can get my wing mirrors to essentially turn in by a press of a button, and if I hold down the lock on the car key, it will bring them in. But I would like them to lock automatic or to go in automatically without me having to hold the button down.
Yeah.
Now, I found out that I can edit the code on the car using something called BIMA code to be able to do exactly that. Yeah, software impacts our lives in
Oh
ways
yeah.
that we don't think about. Yeah, if anyone had said to me, "Hey Ben, you can go ahead and hack your car to turn in your wing mirrors," like that is the kind of thing that we do not think about on a day-to-day basis. But some software is impacting our lives in ways that we do not necessarily always think about. And application vulnerabilities are getting worse and worse and worse. You know, we look back to literally last year and this year, we had Print Nightmare. We then had Log4j, and I can touch on these in a little bit, but we had Print Nightmare. We then had Log4j, and
Right.
recently the 7-zip vulnerability, which is absolutely terrifying. The 7-zip vulnerability uses the HTML helper that's actually built into Windows to be able to run remote code execution and to be able to do privilege escalation. So they can very, very simply go ahead and run whatever line of code they want and run it as admin if they wanted to. So it is
Oh, that,
absolutely terrifying, the app vulnerabilities that we're seeing and how dangerous they are. So when we talk about these threats that are coming on, it's not just ransomware. It's
right.
how our applications that we want to use are being utilized against us, and then other malicious activities as well.
And I like where you're going with that, and I don't think, for a lot of the things, right, we talk about ways that you can protect yourselves by making sure you understand the application, by reading the EULA agreement, seeing the data that you're sharing, understanding the applications, the way they work. What is it that you're, giving up as part of having these applications? But to your point, like in your car, for instance, you're not accepting a EULA agreement. I mean, you bought the car, and then all of a sudden now there's all these opportunities that are running on software on this platform that carries you through life on a daily basis. But you don't know what's running back there, right? Most people would never even know that that computer that's running in that car has maybe vulnerabilities.
Exactly. We don't. We There's a term I like to use called implicit trust. And I think as a society, as a global society, we have sadly strayed far too much towards illicit trust or implicit trust,
Yeah,
where we just trust what is given to us. We just go, oh, yeah, surely XYZ manufacturer's got my best interests at heart. Or I can always, a common one, machines, when you go and join a Wi Fi network.
right.
Yeah, okay, you're just trusted that if what's on your machine is totally safe and fine to
Yeah,
run, and suddenly it's on a Wi-Fi network. Now, the
right,
amount of MSPs I'll go to an office and be like, "Hey, can I join your Wi-Fi?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, cool, here you go." And like, I run ransomware demos on my machine, so I
yeah,
have live strains of ransomware that sit, don't get me wrong, in containers, but
right.
I have live strains of ransomware that run on my machine. Now, this implicit trust piece is where we can get really, really bogged down, and where a lot of these attacks can actually come through.
Oh,
BYOD. For context, I used to work at a secondary school, so a middle school, I guess, in the US,
yeah,
as a IT administrator. I was a sysadmin there.
yeah.
I loved it. It was awesome. In the UK, secondary schools don't really have any money, so it kind of teaches you to work with a shoestring budget, sticky tape, and hope.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I was a huge fan of. I was a huge fan of that, and BYOD was a huge push that people were having. And I think now we've started to look at BYOD a bit more and go, there are some significant security risks with having a BYOD policy.
Oh,
So it definitely does. It's cybersecurity is a very, very scary topic, but it is very, very interesting. And this is why I always like to try and follow a zero trust architecture, a zero trust mindset, which is obviously what we here at ThreatLocker do. Because as far as I'm concerned, zero trust is one of the only ways to be able to be truly sure that threats are not allowed to run.
oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And you touched on something there that is pretty interesting, and I think that for a lot of us, the more that we consider, this current world that we live in is all digital, right? I remember working at the AOL help desk back in the day, and that was like when computers really started to kind of take their foothold in regards to utilizing them for, you know, anything other than true business, right? Like there were mostly mainframe computers that were
Yeah.
command control type situations, and all of a sudden there was this thing called the internet, and we didn't really worry about it. We just ran to it, right? And we're like, oh, I want to go check that out. Let's go see what this is. But things have come and turned full circle, and a lot of things that we can be used for good are now being used for bad. And you say something often, which I find is very interesting. I think we should dive into a little bit, is living off of the land. And I think for everyone that has never heard that term, it's good for you to kind of talk a little bit about what that means, because it's so important to recognize that the things that you're using are also can be used against you. And you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to dive into that if you're all right.
Yeah. So essentially, threat actors are getting into machines. They are running malware. They are attacking things in a multitude of ways, whether that be using tools that MSPs use every day, whether that be things like SolarWinds, whether it be, there was the SolarWinds attack, there was the Kaseya attack. There have been a ton of vulnerabilities from a software standpoint. The 7-zip vulnerability I spoke about earlier, Print
Yeah,
90.
yeah.
So they're utilizing these tools. They use things like rubber duckies, which is in my bag. I can try and grab one a little bit later. Rubber ducky is essentially a little USB device. So it looks just like a USB. When you plug it in, it acts as a keyboard and runs whatever line of code you have programmed on that USB. Now, let's be realistic, guys. If I was to go ahead and get a bit of tape and put it over there and write payroll on the side of the tape and drop off in a car park, 7 out of 10 people are going to plug it in, and that's being conservative, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing threat actors are using these tools, but they're then using things called living off the land. And there's a great GitHub about it called LOLBAS. So LOLBAS. And it stands for Living Off the Land Binaries and Scripts. Now, if we think back years ago, threat actors had to go ahead and install their own software to be able to cause issues on your machines, like to be able to wreak havoc. That's what they had to go ahead and do. They don't need to do that anymore. They can use what exists inside of Windows to attack Windows. You can use RunDLL to run remote code directly on the machine, all straight from GitHub. You can use PowerShell. I actually have a PowerShell script that will take a copy of data, your documents technically. It will use PowerShell and then upload it to Google Drive. Now, I'm not aware of a security solution that will go ahead and out of the box block that.
Right.
Bar ThreatLocker, of course, but because otherwise it would be really bad me talking about that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, that right there is a very simple tool that threat actors are able to use to be able to attack your network, to be able to access your data. So we are seeing, C-script, regserve. We're seeing these applications, and you can actually just Google LOLBAS project. The first page, I think, is the GitHub. You can click onto that, and they have like full understanding as to how each of the commands work. It is really, really interesting. So definitely worth checking out.
And I think that to your point, as we start to think as managed services providers, obviously you talked about Log4j and you talked about, some of these other opportunities in the ecosystem, like 7-zip. I can think back to a day, where I'm talking about, we've never really had to watch data traverse, obviously inside of a command and control situation. We could see movement, right? We could see when files moved from others to one another, and then we could go and look and see and put that file back. But now we're traversing cloud workloads, and we're also traversing, virtual infrastructures. And it basically data has the ability to traverse the world, to your point, where, it's uploading, like you said, that PowerShell script to Google Drive. That's super important to recognize as an opportunity as a managed services provider or a technology solution provider, that you would never see that. I mean, and so many people I talk to all the time, I ask, do you review the logs? And they're like, what logs? And I'm like, the logs. Right? No one watches those anymore. And I think we've stopped watching the logs, and we've stopped paying attention to really what's happening in our infrastructures. Obviously, that's a big thing, right, Ben?
Yeah, I think we need to start trying to. The problem is we've become so connected in the IT world now. Everything relies on IT. That it's often overwhelming to be able to look at all of these pieces that you're mentioning. So from my standpoint, we need to be focusing and looking at IT solutions
Yeah.
and software, etc., that can help to solve these problems for us. But better than that, I like to say, by all means, we should be looking at solutions like that, but we should also realistically be looking at vendors who want to build a relationship. I used to work at another large scale vendor. Prior to that, I worked at an MSP as well. And from my MSP mindset, my key thing was, how is this vendor going to help me grow? How is it they're going to inform me on the most upcoming news? Let's be realistic.
Yeah.
MSPs have sadly not enough time in the world to be able to do what they're already doing of looking after customers,
Yeah.
let alone trying to stay up to date with the most common threats that are going on and most common attacks and all that kind of thing. So I would also try to pair with vendors, not just who can look after you from a solving those initial needs you may have, but also vendors who are putting out news articles, vendors who are trying to build a community, vendors
Yeah.
who are trying to educate their first their first focus isn't just buy my product, see you later.
Yeah.
It's want to help MSPs grow and build the MSP community. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I said something during the beginning of the pandemic that was on I was on, I had my Making IT Simple show running, and I said who vendors are during this time is going to dictate their success far after this time.
100%.
And we saw a lot of great vendors, do a lot of good work, and that's where I think community and managed services providers, that's what we were all about, right? Is that community component. We're having to become together as a community as a whole to really bring in vendors alike to try to figure out solutions to our customer problems to try to protect the world, right? And I think that we have to be really cognizant of building that ecosystem out. And I really hats off to you guys for doing such a great job, because during that time there was a lot of stuff that was coming out that took a community to really hold down the fort in the technology space, and you guys were one of the ones that raised that flag and said, hey, we're here to help. So
Yeah,
kudos to Brett Locker and to you.
thank you. I mean, there were a huge influx in attacks
Oh yeah.
over the over the pandemic, because let's be realistic, everyone's then working from home. We
Yeah.
had that while when everyone was, and threat actors understood that you don't have the same security that you've got on your
You're
work
100%.
network at home. So why would we not go ahead and attack that? Why would we not um, try to make our money that way? It's
Yeah.
kind of easy pickings. So
Yeah.
for them, it was a much easier piece of entry, and that is definitely why we started seeing a lot more attacks. But again, I think it also links back to my earlier point of being realistic. We are becoming a much more IT reliant world.
Hmm.
Every single day, we're becoming more IT reliant with new pieces of software that come out, new solutions that we're utilizing, and I think because of that, we're only ever going to start seeing more attacks. So we always want to try and make sure that we are as protected as possible.
Well, we got one guest coming in on your trivia question. What was your trivia question again, Ben?
So, what was the name of the first documented version of ransomware? And obviously, bonus point if you can tell me the year.
Yeah. So we got one guest come in from Mohammed. He says crypto, but I don't know. We're not going to release the answer till the very end here, but definitely, if you guys got a thought, put it in the chat. We're paying attention. Two lucky winners are going to win today. That being said, one of the things, obviously, is we kind of talk a little bit about, the threats in the space and kind of ways that we move forward.
Yes.
What are you seeing as good tactics or a way to kind of protect ourselves? Managed service provider, customer. I know we increased our threat landscape
Mm.
drastically during the pandemic, right? I say all the time that I would throw you the keys to my car, but I would never throw you the keys to my computer.
Mm.
That's not going to happen. I like you, invite you to dinner, love you,
Yeah,
but I don't know what your cyber hygiene posture looks like. And we
100%.
really drastically increased our attack surface. But what are some of the tactics and some of the things you're seeing that, obviously from an elevation control or storage control, all these different things, like what are some of the paths forward for that?
Yeah, so like from my standpoint, I've been doing cybersecurity for probably about 8 years now, something around there, and I've seen a shift through cybersecurity. It was something I was always very interested in years and years ago as well. But realistically, my firm belief with cybersecurity is that the best way to protect yourself is going to be by utilizing a zero trust architecture,
Yep.
by essentially only allowing what you need to be able to run, only let that run. And we essentially do that through four key components. So it comes under a few different names: deny by default, default deny, or application whitelisting.
Hmm.
Depending on who's saying it, it can come under different names. It's essentially all the same thing. Essentially, is XYZ application executable file that executes allowed to be able to run? Um, and I would argue that is going to be the first and the best way to be able to stop against a majority of attacks that are going on in your machines. By limiting what files are allowed to run on your machine, you can then limit, well, the threats, the attacks that are happening. Um, and that will essentially work off of a default deny approach. Now, over from there, you then have ring fencing. Once you've chosen what applications you want to be allowed to run, you then want to go ahead and lock down what those applications can do. Because if we think about it, when an app is installed on your machine, it has full access to everything that you have got access to on your machine,
Yep.
which sounds fine to start off with, because we initially think of, I mean, I say it sounds fine. We think of Google Chrome. No one really likes Google Chrome having access to all of their data, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a necessary evil. We've kind of
Kind
accepted
of
it.
one of those things. Yeah.
It's yeah, you just kind of have to deal with it. It's that or Edge. Like no one knows. I don't want Edge.
That's another webinar.
Yeah, we're going to go into some hot topics there that I expect we'll have a fair few people being. I could upset people with my browsers of choice. So, but we look at the apps that have access to our data. We go, okay, Google Chrome, yeah, you should probably have access. But what about that application that you installed 6 months ago to fix that niche driver issue you had?
Yeah.
Or that buggy audio bit that you, let's be realistic, you downloaded it from a Russian FTP site. And yes, it
Yeah.
fixed the problem. And 99% sure it isn't doing anything nefarious. But how do we know?
Yeah.
That's the problem, because that app now has access to your data. What about
Yeah.
the application that the customer that you support has requested they have to use? Even
Right.
though it's from the early 2000s, it hasn't had updates in 10 years, and they are
Hmm.
still saying that is what they have to go ahead and utilize.
Yep.
Like that right there, that is why we need ring fencing, to limit what these applications are not being updated, these shady applications, basically limit how applications are able to be utilized against us.
And I
Now,
think one big thing, Ben, is, with the modern OSs that are coming out, whether we're adopting, Chrome as a new OS, right? We're adding another layer of opportunity into, a world that we aren't that familiar with. I saw Windows 11 when I could add all my apps. I was super excited. I was like,
yeah,
yes, finally. And then I was thinking about it from a security perspective on the other end, right? Because there's the person that goes running into, oh my God, I can increase productivity and have all these apps. But then there was the other side was, what exactly am I adding to my machine from a liability capability? Because now Windows isn't really even truly looking at those, Windows Defender or whatever antivirus you're using, they're not necessarily scanning them the same ways, right? Because they're used to scanning heuristics and Windows OS type applications, and now they got to scan APKs and all these other types of things, right?
yeah,
So
and I mean this is part of my issue with like AV tools in general. And I want to preface this with the fact that I do like AV tools. I think they are useful. So
fair enough.
please do not. I don't
Yeah,
want like videos
yeah.
of
Don't
me
blame us in
going.
the chat, man.
Yeah,
Don't throw us
yeah.
off. Yeah,
I don't want videos online going of Ben Jenkins hates AV tools. That is
yeah.
not true in
That's
the
not what we're
slightest.
saying.
I like AV tools. I think they're very good. My issue with AV tools, though, is generally, they are looking for exactly what you said. They're looking at heuristics. They're looking at definitions, and they're looking sometimes at behaviors. The problem is with that, the definition has to be had to be able to tell you that it's bad. So I have to know that something is bad already to be able to say that it is bad,
Yeah.
which means that it's not stopping zero-day vulnerabilities.
Right.
The other problem is behaviors. I need to know what a bad behavior looks like. Well, a zero-day vulnerability isn't going to look like a bad behavior. It's going to look totally fine. And this is where I think AV tools are great, but they definitely have their flaws. And this
Right.
is why that zero trust architecture of app whitelisting, of ring fencing apps so they can't be weaponized against you, locking down internet access, etc. You mentioned earlier elevation control. Take away admin rights from users, but allow them to run individual apps as a administrator. And then obviously storage control, lock down your data so that apps can't steal it.
Right.
Like that right there, by utilizing zero trust architecture in conjunction maybe with AV tools,
Right.
is definitely going to be the best way to keep yourself protected in our ever-changing IT landscape.
And I don't think it's not gonna get any different, right? Because we're only moving further and faster towards this converged era of app enablement, right? And as we start to think about the different kinds of technologies that we want to adopt and IoT devices that we want to implement, we have to start thinking in a different way, right? We have to start thinking about, it's not the same command and control that we grew up with, right? That technology, I mean, yes, we have a firewall in our house, but everyone knows that's not the best line of defense. We're getting hammered in our personal lives for many people. I like to tell the story of my dad all the time. That guy, he's like my best, for instance, story that I have. For the longest time, I told him, don't do these things. And he would just get hammered with ransomware at every turn. And I was like, every tool I had was trying to protect this guy. And I'm like, I'd like to know how you even get there. Like, as a profession, I go looking and I can't get there, but somehow you're finding this blindly. And he's just like, I go to MSN, son. And I'm like, that is not true. That is
This is the
not
thing,
true.
and
Like,
you kind of want to turn around and you want to say, "Hey, can I follow you for like
I actually
a day and
honestly
a half,
wasn't
2 days?"
Yeah, I honestly wasn't sure I wanna know the answer to that because I was like, "I can't fathom where you're going to get this." Like, I'm not even sure. I haven't even seen this strain.
Yeah,
Oh, it's so good. But to your point, I think that there are so many opportunities for us, and we need to be thinking completely differently on how we approach security. And
100%.
I love what you guys are doing because it changes the game and it allows people to still be productive. It
Yes.
allows companies to still be flexible and inherit what was going to be the future, which is now remote work, which is now the norm, right? And I think that we have to just recognize that our expanded threat landscape is only expanding by the minute to the
Oh yeah.
point where I'm assuming that your car will be tied into your home network soon enough, right, Ben?
Oh yeah. 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 And this is the thing. It is only ever going to be ever expanding,
Yeah,
and I think we need to make sure that we have solutions in place to be able to try and protect ourselves, to be able to minimize the threats. I think any AV tool, let me rephrase that, not AV tool, any security company that says we can stop all of these threats is lying, and I like to be very clear with that. I think security is, in its best case, we are trying to mitigate and minimize the damage that
right.
threats can have, and that is my realistic thought of the day, for anyone to take that away. With a security tool, what you're getting is protection as much as possible, and then mitigation against any damage that may be caused as well. And I think with our ever expanding IT lives, that is something that we are definitely going to be focusing on. The security side of IT has exploded over the
Yeah,
last 2 years completely. With new security companies coming up. I mean, ThreatLock's had an insane amount of growth over the last 5
yeah,
years. Vendors rebranding themselves to more of a security focused company as well. The security attacks that have been going on against other vendors. Security is the place that everyone is focusing, and I truly believe it's only going to get more and more. I was going to say busy, hectic is probably the
oh,
better
yeah.
term to use there.
I mean, and it's moving so fast, right? So we even saw the rebranding in the managed services space, right?
Yes.
MSPs, where we went from break fix to as needed to on demand to MSP to now MSSP,
SSD.
right?
Yeah.
So there was evolution there, but I know there's an advanced MSP offering coming next because it's moving so far, so fast, so quickly that for those that haven't jumped on to figure out what security best practices
Oh yeah.
or some NIST, aligning their products with NIST frameworks or CMMC or thinking on security best practice, it's coming and it's moving really fast. That train, I mean, we're seeing cybersecurity companies, insurance companies by the day standing themselves up saying, look, we're coming in helping managed services providers trying to get in front of this thing because we recognize this is a big thing. So when you're thinking about it, Ben, obviously you got a pretty good pulse on it. Where's it going, man? Where do we, I mean, we know how to protect ourselves. We know some of the best practices now. Where are we going next?
Where are we going next? My issue with security in general right now is that I tend to find that it's a very cat and mouse game
Mm,
between threat actors, users, and MSPs, security providers, MSPs or security providers. I Where do I believe we're going to go next? I'm hoping that we can move a bit more out of that cat and mouse game, but in my realistic mindset, it is only going to get worse. And I don't like to be doom and gloom all the time. I don't, but this is where I truly believe, and I spoke about it earlier, of partnering with MSPs, partnering with vendors who are able to help you, not just from a product standpoint, but from an educational standpoint, understanding the threats that are coming out, understanding what
yeah,
is happening, proof of concepts, even educational pieces. We try to be as educational as we can.
right.
Uh, that is going to be our best way to be able to stop, frankly, the looming threats that are going to be happening. I mean, we've seen the types of attacks that have been going on over the last month based on the Russia Ukraine conflict.
Yeah,
There was a new piece of malware that came out over there at the start of the conflict called the wiper virus. Essentially, started infecting Ukrainian servers, wiping data. Just very simple and straightforward. And I do believe over the next coming years, we're going to start seeing a lot more of these large scale attacks going on.
yeah. Well, and that brings me to it because you're coming to Build It Live 2022, and you guys are on the main stage.
Yes.
Your topic, I believe, is stop chasing, start defending. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, yes. So I'm a huge fan of ransomware, which is actually part of where that comes from. Stop chasing, start defending. We need to start trying to protect ourselves against ransomware and the attacks that are happening. Again, it's not just ransomware; it is the application vulnerabilities, and we can always try to stay 2 steps ahead.
Right.
But realistic, props where props is due. These threat actors are very clever people.
Yeah.
They know the solution. They know Windows inside and out. They know Macs inside and out. They know Linux inside out. They know the loopholes. They know the threat holes that they can jump through to be able to attack your systems. So you trying to stay 2 steps ahead isn't always viable, especially as I mentioned earlier, we know how busy MSPs are. We know they haven't got the time to be able to do all this.
Yeah, it's true.
So what is there we can do? Well, realistically, we need to start trying to defend. And again, I know I always rant on about it, but zero trust is our best line of defense that we have out there in the wild right now.
I am going to go ahead and check that box and say zero. I am in for zero trust as well. I think that is really truly kind of where we're headed. I come from the old era of command and control back in the day where we didn't let anybody do anything. So the further, the faster that we can move back to just pure productivity, I think is kind of best practice. But again, I'm biased, right? I was built that way. I come from an old school programming background that, only let them do exactly what they need to do
Yeah,
was our mantra, right?
yeah.
Because you don't want them in anywhere else like there's variables in the code, right? So I love that idea, and I think that's a modern era approach to where we need to be. One of the other things too is at Build It Live, you got a couple sessions. You're going to be there. We're excited to have you. You got a lot of great topics, but this particular webinar is only part one of part two, and me and you get to riff again next week, man.
I do believe we do. Yes, I think we're going to be talking about application vulnerabilities next week. So
Next
we'll
week.
touch a bit more on kind of what I mentioned earlier about the vulnerabilities that we've been seeing with Print Nightmare and Log4j and that kind of stuff. So that was a little teaser.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're interested in that kind of thing, yeah, definitely come along.
I am excited to see where we go next week. I'm always there's a nerd hidden deep inside of me that like loves to get into the nitty gritty parts of
Yeah,
like all the tech. So as much as we're talking about, kind of, cursory overview components of like what do we need to do being from a business perspective and also just kind of from a technology overview perspective, I love to see getting in there and like getting it in. So for all of you that are joining us next week, I know that Ben and I are going to be having some fun on that. So one of the other things I want to talk about real quick, just before we go, obviously we got that trivia question that's still out there. I don't know that we've had anyone 100% answer it yet. What was the name of the first documented ransomware? Ben's going to be releasing that answer here in just a minute. And I wanted to also give you guys, if you guys hadn't heard about Build It Live 2022, July 27th through 29th, we have Eli Manning coming, man. I don't know, Ben, are you a football fan?
I football to me is soccer
Yes,
to you.
it's
So
soccer.
yeah, I always I
U.S.
will
football.
always so I like to watch I always like watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah, yeah.
But if I'm slowly starting to get into like US sports,
All
and
right.
my sport of choice is it's ice
No,
hockey and baseball. I've been
right.
to I saw the Red Sox at Fenway Park. That was just awesome because it's everything I like. I can sit there, I can eat food, I can drink, I can talk, and I can watch a game. So that was awesome. And I saw the Red Sox again in the UK. They had a game over there. So yeah, ice hockey, baseball, but football is something I'm starting to. It's just the rules, man. It's
Well,
hard for me to follow.
well, here's the thing then. So you said you liked food, you like to drink, you like to talk. What better way than to also talk with your partners and MSPs? Because we're gonna be at MetLife Stadium too, man. We're gonna be having some fun. Eli Manning's gonna be there. For those that are out there, you're gonna get to do a little meet and greet for some unique people. So register today so you can get entered into that for the VIP meet and greet experience. 25 lucky winners are gonna get a VIP experience with Eli Manning. Again, we're gonna be at MetLife. You're going to get to hang out with me and Ben. We're going to be eating, drinking, having a good time, talking about security, talking about what's next and how to like, building that community, man. I'm really excited to have you there, buddy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it.
So we got the Threat Locker $200 tickets. Lock it in at 200 today. For those of you that register, today's the day. Threat Locker has been so gracious and kind to really put together a great program and joining us at Build It. So use the code when you're checking out at Build It Live. There's going to be a link for you guys to register for the event today. But we got some fun, Ben. So let's talk about the trivia real quick because I want to know the answer to this. Let's go real quick. What was the name of the first documented ransomware, Ben?
Yeah, sure. So the first documented version of ransomware, as we would say today, is actually a version of ransomware called the AIDS Trojan. It was all the way back in 1989. So if anyone managed to guess that as the date, congrats. It's always very interesting because we always think of the first piece of ransomware as 2012, 2013. We think CryptoLocker v3. That was my first
Yeah.
piece of proper ransomware I jumped into. I think it hit like 250,000 machines globally. But yeah, it was actually all the way back in 1989 was when the first piece of true ransomware was going through and infecting systems. The reason it's called the AIDS Trojan is actually it's very interesting. It was sent out to AIDS researchers through a AIDS research magazine through floppy disks. And when they would go ahead and put this floppy disk into their system on the 90th boot cycle, it would go ahead and reboot their machine and infect all of their data. So it was very, very essentially it's what we would call today as ransomware. It is kind of our first and foremost there. So very, very interesting piece of ransomware.
Yeah, and what an era to go back to. To your point, I remember getting, back being an IT admin, I remember our in early days getting hit with ransomware, and I don't recall it being that early. I think it was later in the 2000s that I remember officially getting one of the first versions, and of course it was just
Oh
wipe
yeah.
and start over. But it's interesting to see that, it was back to the floppy disk days. For many, I don't
Yes.
even know if I have one.
Well,
To tell
so
you the truth.
it's actually really interesting. It kind of died off.
Yeah,
In 1989, it hit. and it died off because obviously, how does ransomware, how do threat
Right.
actors get their money right now from ransomware? Well, you get paid into a cryptocurrency account, right? You have a crypto wallet that generally they would get paid into. Cryptocurrencies didn't exist back in
No,
1989.
they didn't.
So for the threat actor to get their money, they had to get paid to a PO box and based out of Panama. Now, let's
Oh,
be realistic. The guy who created this, guy called Joseph Pop, he got caught pretty quickly because,
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of traceable. So it's very, very interesting because we saw this kind of ransomware kind of dropped off a bit, and then early 2000s, it really started to come
Yeah.
back in again,
Yeah. Yeah.
and these attacks happening.
Well, I never shipped any real cash, but I do remember losing a number of machines in that early era.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Ben, but we do have one last bit of business. Here's the thing, right? So obviously, hey, happy May the 4th today for all of you that are celebrating May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, first and foremost, right? For all of us Star Wars fans.
Yes, that's very much. I woke up to a text from my sister of a gift from Star Wars this morning to May the 4th be with you, and it is Darth Vader dancing. So
Uh,
yeah, I didn't realize it was, but yeah.
Well, so I was reminded this morning in a Slack chat where it was like, you know, when Mac devices were relative to Star Wars and Windows devices were relative to Star Trek, which I started a whole flame, right? And I was like, oh, really? And so then I said Android users, which I am, when I always make this Android Mac comparison, I said Android users equal Spaceballs. And everybody was like, "Oh, that's much better," even though I don't like Android.
See, I'm a self-confessed Apple fanboy.
All
So
right, all
I
right.
will. I think my thing is I like Android solutions. I spend far too much time fixing my family's machines.
Oh,
But
I know.
frankly, I just want a solution that, without sounding like an Apple fanboy, just works.
Yeah.
So I've just lost so many internet points for even just saying all of that. I can guarantee that. But yeah. So, guys,
Awesome.
if you want to debate with me about iPhones, the Apple product ecosystem, definitely come along to build it. That'll be, yeah,
Oh, yes, we'll definitely get some of that. Right after I get our picture with Eli Manning, we can go over in the
yes,
corner and just separate the room. So we got a couple of winners for today, Ben. It looks like we got a couple. Do you see those in the chat? You wanna announce our winners for the
yes.
free
So
passes to Build It 2022?
yeah, so I think it's Audra Vega,
Yep.
and I think we're going with Husni Muhammad.
Yes.
So congrats, guys.
Yes, congrats, you guys. You will get a link sent to you shortly after this for registration details. But congratulations, you're coming to Build It 2022, and you got a free ticket. So we can't wait, and you're going to get a chance to meet me and Ben, and we're going to talk about Apple and Mac devices.
I can't wait. It's
Oh,
gonna be it's gonna be
I'm
so
gonna,
divisive.
I might need some reinforcements. Where's all my Android friends at?
Yeah, it's
So.
gonna be so divisive. There's people are gonna get very angry. I can see it now. So
All right. Well, Ben, I am looking forward. Next week, we're going to be talking again. We're going to be talking about great stuff. So, for those of you that are joining us today, make sure you register next week for our webinar where we're going to come and have another good time. Also, don't forget to register for your Lock It In at 200 from Threat Locker today only, for Build It Live 2022. And we're going to join you and all of your friends and have a wonderful talk and have a great chat with the community and learn a lot in our education event, July 27th through 29th. And I'm looking forward to having you. I'll see you. Ben, thanks for having us. And thanks for everyone that joined us today.
thank you, guys. Have a good day.
All right. Happy May the 4th, everybody.